guys, Gary Lucas with Obsidian Painting here today. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to get to show you guys how to paint with Vallejo paints, okay? And I'm going to show you why I think these things are so amazing. So I'm going to be doing the Brother Corbullo, okay? And the client actually suggested, but he wanted it to be painted a brighter red than the red that is on the GW website on their photo. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. I may plop it in here, but it's pretty red. So I'm gonna have to really pull out some stops here to kind of really make this brighter. So there's a few things I'm gonna do. The first thing is I'm gonna prime it white, okay? So as you can see, it's primed white, and what that's gonna do is that's gonna make the colors be more vibrant, okay? And it also allows me to create the contrast myself by painting in the shadows. Okay, otherwise, black is, if you prime with black, it's essentially going to make it so your shadows will be black. There's not as much contrast unless you really brighten it up by adding a lot of paint. But we're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be painting over this guy. I'm really not going to show you how to paint a lot of the parts. I'm really only going to show you how to paint the red, because that's really the only part that's important. Everything else is just kind of everything else. So without further ado, I'm going to be using 3 paints. I may add in black, but I'm not sure. But I'm definitely going to be using Vallejo Model Color Flat Red, Vallejo Model Color Vermilion, and this color is the color that's going to be making it seem brighter than it is. This color is actually quite fantastic. It's a little orangey, but it's also just reddy. It's really good. And then for shadows, I'm going to be using Burnt Cadmium Red, okay? And it's, once again, these are all Vallejo Model Color, and then I may or may not add in just Games Workshop Chaos Black. Okay, I'll be right back. Alright, so I've prepared all the paints on my palette, and we're good to go. So I'm going to start off with flat red, and I'm just going to thin these down a little bit. I don't need to thin them down a lot. The cool thing about the Vallejo paints is that instead of being, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but they're essentially vinyl-based acrylic paints, as opposed to, I have no idea. But because of that, they work in a slightly different way, and I think it's a way that is definitely beneficial. So all I'm going to do is just take the flat red and just paint it on. I've thinned it down just a bit. It'll look pinkish at first, but then what you're going to do is you just do a couple layers, and those couple of layers will really bring out the redness of it. Here, I'll do this on a little better part of the model. Okay, so already it's kind of bright, and that's because of the white. And the Vallejo Flat Red, in case you don't use Vallejo paints, it's similar to the Games Workshop Blood Red. Okay. So all I'm going to do is paint this all over the model, and I'll be right back. Alright, so after I've managed to get paint pretty much on everything, we're going to go into do some shading. Okay, so I'll zoom in a little bit there. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just add a tiny bit of the red, the flat red, to some burnt cadmium. Add some water. Thin it down a little bit. we're going to come in and we're just going to apply it to all the shadows. Okay, and this is where the simpleness of the Vallejo paints kind of comes in. So, just going to apply it. Now you see I've applied it down here. It looks a little weird, but that's okay. Once you do a couple layers, it actually looks really good. Okay. So yeah, that was pretty simple. Let's do this here. And you want to thin it down. You want to make sure it's dry before you apply the next layer. You're going to see some streaks, but don't worry about the streaks, because the way the Vallejo paints work is it looks like it's streaky when it's drying, but then when it dries it's not streaky. It's kind of weird. So yeah, you essentially want to block in all your shadows. As you can see kind of here, I've kind of blocked them in. Now you're like, Gary, why isn't it blended? Why aren't you blending? Don't worry about it. The cool thing with the Vallejo paints is they actually blend really well. But I don't know what it is, but for the Vallejo, I like to block in the shadows and then kind of blend it all together once I start going into the highlights. Okay? So you're essentially just going to be layering here. You want to add a little bit of water so that way it flows better. So I'm going to do this and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've kind of blocked in all the shadows. Kind of see that there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with flat red. I'm going to thin it down a bit. Okay. So what this will look like is you want to thin it down to what we're used to using with our glazing technique. Okay, we're going to come in, we're going to kind of start where our shadows kind of end and kind of pull the paint up towards where we want our highlights. Okay, we can do that a couple times until it looks essentially like you want it to. And you may be saying, Gary, it looks weird. Why is it so blocky? Don't worry about it. Stop it. We're gonna be blending it together. It's gonna look good. You just gotta trust me. Come on, get in focus. Once again, you may find that sometimes the Vallejo paint looks streaky. Don't worry about it. The Vallejo paint, I don't know what it is about it. It looks streaky when it's wet, but then it dries perfect and amazing. Don't know what it is. It's just how it works. I always feel funny painting their crotches, because I don't know, it's just kind of funny. Okay, you want to go in this until essentially it's blended. You're using the flat red to kind of blend the burnt cadmium into, well, I guess the flat red. So we're gonna worry about the highlights yet. I mean, we're pulling the flat red towards our highlights, but that's only so we blend the burnt cadmium essentially into the base coat, so that way we have a good kind of foundation for doing the highlights. Alright, I'm going to do this so I don't take up all your time. Alright, so now that we've done that, as you can see, there's stuff that's pretty much nicely blended. We're also going to be redoing, well, not redoing, but kind of reapplying shadows at some point, just to make sure everything's nice and separated. But now we're going to get into the highlighting. Ooh. So we're going to add some of that vermilion to the flat red, and show you what I'm doing here. And we're just doing the same thing as we did in the last step, just pulling it up, get it nice and blended. Okay, so just a slight reiteration, if you are only using kind of like GW paints, there are 3 paints that I'm using here. Okay, so one is flat red. You can essentially replace that with blood red. The burnt cadmium is quite similar to dark flesh, however it is a little different. And the vermilion is kind of like a half-half mix of blood red and blazing orange. Okay, so you can follow along even if you're not using the Vallejo paints. Okay, so we're essentially going to do this, and then we're going to go into straight vermilion. Okay, so I'll be right back. Alright, so now we're going to go into straight vermilion. I'm going to show you kind of like what stage we're at right now, so that's kind of what it's looking like. Or I'll show you the shoulder pad again. Okay, so we're going to go into pretty much straight vermilion. And then there's 2 more things we're going to do. We're going to do another shadow layer, then we're going to do final highlights. And the final highlights are going to be essentially edge highlights. Okay, and essentially the edge highlights, what that's going to do is that's going to make it all stand out. It's going to make it pop. And then we're also, as I said, we're doing another shadow layer, and the shadow layer essentially is just going to separate all the parts just a little bit more, and kind of slightly, blend everything together. And we're probably going to do a wash for that, or a glaze, or glazing a wash. We'll see. Alright, I'm just going to finish this up and then we'll be right back. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're going to move on to the edge highlights. And I'm going to start off with flat red. Just add a tiny bit of water, make it flow just a little bit better. And you're essentially just going to start and just kind of hit the edge. Just like that. Okay. You're going to do that on the whole model, and then when we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same thing, but using the vermilion. Okay, so now we're going to do the edge highlight, and we're just going to add just the vermilion this time. Once again, we're going to take it, add just a tiny bit of water, make it flow a little better. Okay, and here we go. Just like that. Okay, I'll try and get one of a close-up for you. Okay, just the edge there. See that? Just like that. Okay? The edge of each part. Okay, I'll be right back when I'm done. Alright, so now that we've got all the edge highlighting done, we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be the washing. So I'm going to use Bal Red, which is Games Workshop, and if I feel it needs another wash, I may do a Chaos Black, or maybe Bal Red mixed with Chaos Black. We'll see. Okay. So I'm essentially going to glaze this by putting it all over. What this is going to do is this is going to tone down the oranginess, make it look more red. So to properly glaze, you essentially want a nice even coating. So even though I'm using a wash, just make sure you don't really let it pool and you let it kind of have a nice, well, even coating. Okay. So I think I may end up doing a quick little Chaos Black wash. It still feels like there needs to be more shadow. This feels way too bright for me. Now you may be looking over here at the shoulder pad and be like, Gary, the shoulder pad looks like poop. We're actually going to be painting the trim a different color, so that's why I'm not painting it, and that's why it looks like poop. Don't worry about the trim. In fact, everything kind of looks like poop and messy because I got paint everywhere. This is generally how I paint. When I'm painting the bigger areas, I tend to get paint everywhere. But then as I slowly progress and move on to the smaller parts, I manage not to get paint everywhere. I don't know how I do it, but I do. Alright, so now I'm just going to put the mini down for a sec. Kind of grab my Chaos Black. I think it's gonna need some of this. So I'm gonna grab some of this out of the pot and put it in one of my well palettes and add a drop of water or two. I want to thin it down. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, because we're actually going to use this as a wash. So you want to pretty much apply it directly into the recesses. Just like this. It's gonna tone it down. And I don't want to get rid of that. There we go. So all I did was to kind of maintain some of the blending we did up here. I just took my finger to it. You can use, what's the word? Like a Q-tip or something. A cotton-tipped device, I'm gonna call it. Alright, let that dry and see what that looks like. Alright, and this is what the model looks like, kind of finished. The base still needs to be done. But yeah. You can see how the red turned out once you put everything else kind of with it.